September 19th, 1998. The barbecue was well underway, the food cooked, and the beer was flowing for those who could drink. Parked up in the dunes were a dozen or more motorbikes. It was the annual event for the bike club to end the season. Though not so much a club, more a group of friends with a love of bikes. The lifeguards had left the beach, and the tide was in. Driving the group to the edge of the dunes, Jeff, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a full beard in his mid-40s, noticed her first. He knew something was odd when she turned up on the beach. Her long denim skirt, thick sweater, and long overcoat would have been less out of place on a cold winter night than on this unseasonably balmy early autumn evening, with people still walking around in swimsuits. She stood out like a sore thumb. Jeff walked over to her and invited her to join them. As she looked up at him, he recognized something. The unkempt hair, the sunken eyes that looked as though they hadn't slept in days. All of this reminded him of something he'd seen before in the not-too-distant past. She turned down the invitation and moved further down the beach. As Jeff went back to his friends, he got some ribbing from them. Lenny was especially vocal as he put his arm around his friend's shoulders. "Come on now, Jeff. You're not so desperate you have to try to pick up a bag lady." "She's no bag lady, Lenny. She may look a mess, but those clothes are expensive. I don't know what the problem is, but she looks very troubled." Lenny was 6 feet tall, broad-shouldered with a shaved head. By day, he was known as Leonard Wilshire. He wore a pinstriped suit, not that he liked it, but a stockbroker's clients expected a sober dress code. Evenings and weekends, he was out on the bike, dressed in leathers, and a bandana covering his shaved head when it wasn't covered by a helmet. He was a smooth operator and looked after Jeff's investments. Jeff was more than just a client, though. He was a friend and a fellow biker. "She's not your problem. Now, come on back to the party. I'm sure we can fix you up with some female company." As the beach party continued, Jeff kept an eye on the woman down the beach. He had no problem finding girls to dance with and even share some lighthearted moments, but the vagrant woman still occupied his mind. As darkness fell, the party broke up. They gathered up the rubbish and dropped it in the back of Jeff's pickup truck. One by one, the bikes started up and disappeared into the night. As soon as the last person left, Jeff made his way through the dunes to where the woman sat on the sand. She appeared to be waiting for something or someone. The surf crashed on the beach, showing white in the moonlight as the tide retreated. She got up and started walking toward the water. She reached the water's edge and continued to walk straight ahead. This is what Jeff had been afraid of. When he first saw her face, he knew where he'd seen the look before. 2 years ago, he'd caught sight of himself in a mirror and seen that very same look. As she walked into the water, he knew what he had to do. Running down the beach toward her, Jeff realized her intention and knew he couldn't let it happen. He hurried toward the water, the cool ocean lapping at her knees, soaking her heavy denim skirt. Jeff reached the water's edge, calling out to her. But if she heard him, she gave no sign. The waves crashed at her thighs as Jeff swam toward her, the coat and skirt weighing heavily on her. Just as she was about to throw herself forward into the retreating tide, Jeff stood up behind her and grabbed her around the waist. Startled by his sudden presence, the woman screamed, struggling to break free. "I'm sorry. I can't let you do this," Jeff shouted to make himself heard over the sound of the waves crashing onto the shore. "Leave me alone. I want to die," the woman screamed back. "If we go out any further, the tide will catch us, and we'll both drown. Is that what you want?" He turned her around to face him. "Let me go. I don't want to live anymore. If you go out there, I'll have to try and rescue you. I'm not a good swimmer, and with this tide running, we'll probably both die. Please, save my life, and come out of the water." Her hands came up to her mouth, and she looked straight into his eyes as tears rolled down her cheeks. Deep sobs forced their way from her chest. Jeff wrapped his arms around her and held her against him as they stood in the surf for several minutes, battling against the waves to stay upright. Then Jeff led her back to the dry sand. As they made their way up toward the dunes, he picked up the clothes he'd scattered across the beach. He knew he couldn't leave her. He had to get her away from the beach. He lifted the soaked coat from her shoulders. "I think this coat is ruined. The skirt may be salvageable, but the sweater has probably had it. Either way, you'd better get out of them. If the wind picks up, you'll freeze. Here, put on my jeans and sweatshirt. I've got a jacket in the pickup. I can wear that." They exchanged a look, and the woman reached to unfasten her skirt. She glanced at Jeff expectantly. "Well, go on then, turn around." Jeff apologized and turned his back, hoping she wouldn't try to make a break for the sea. "It's all right. You can look now," she said. He turned around and burst out laughing. The jeans dragged on the ground, and she had to hold the waistband to stop them from falling down, while the sleeves of his sweatshirt completely covered her hands. "I'm sorry for laughing, but that really is an outfit that only fits where it touches. Stand still, and I'll roll the legs up. I've got some rope in the pickup we can use as a belt." He knelt and rolled up the jeans' legs until she was no longer standing on them. As he stood back up, he smiled at her. "Now that you've managed to get into my jeans, I think I deserve to know your name." "It's Helen. Helen Mallister." "Well, Helen Mallister, I'm Jeff Cockburn, and it's a pleasure to meet you. Now let's find you a belt and get off this beach before it gets cold." They walked to the pickup. Jeff found the rope, threaded it through the jeans, and pulled it tight around her waist. Once inside the truck, Jeff turned the vehicle around. "Jeff, why are you doing this?" "Because I want to, and because I owe someone." He would have said more, but suddenly, in the moonlight, he saw something. A woman, tall and athletic, wearing a white swimsuit, pushed her long dark hair back from her face as she emerged from the surf. Jeff reached out and shook Helen's leg. "Do you see that?" he asked, pointing toward the water. "See what?" "I can only see the waves and sand." Jeff looked again, but there was no one. He shook his head, feeling uneasy. "Jeff, are you all right?" "I'm fine," he replied, snapping back to reality. "Now, I bet you haven't eaten in a while. Since you didn't want any of our burgers or sausages, I'm going to treat you to the best fish and chips in all of Cornwall." Jeff set off toward Padstow, glancing at Helen from time to time, trying to gauge her state of mind. He hoped showing her kindness would help somehow. She hadn't resisted or shown much interest in anything, almost as if nothing could make things any worse. "What do you mean by owing someone?" Helen asked. "Someone did something for me a while ago. I can't pay them back, so I'm paying it forward. I'll tell you about it later. Where are we going?" "To Padstow, for fish and chips." They drove in silence until Jeff pulled into a parking space. He jumped from the cab, walked around to open the passenger door, and said, "Out you get. We've arrived." Helen looked at the shop front. "I thought you said fish and chips. I've heard of this place. It's a restaurant run by that TV chef. It's very grand and probably expensive. I can't go in like this. I don't even have shoes on." They came off at the beach. "Relax, it's just a chip shop. His fancy restaurant is across town. They know me here. Come on." He took her arm and guided her inside. The man behind the counter greeted him warmly. "Hi, Jeff. Expecting the rest of the crowd tonight?" "Not tonight, Brian. Just looking for a table for two." "Sorry, Jeff. We closed half an hour ago." Jeff glanced at the empty restaurant. "Yeah, I can see you've been run off your feet. Could you maybe put some cod and chips on a plate for the lady, and a chip buddy for me? I'll even do the washing up." Brian laughed. "You? Washing up? That'll be the day. Do you want drinks?" "I'll have coffee, and I think the lady might like hot chocolate." Brian nodded. "Right you are, Jeff. Go sit, and I'll bring them over." They found a table, and Jeff excused himself to use the restroom. When he returned, the food was waiting. Helen's eyes no longer seemed as empty as before. She still wasn't all right, but something had shifted. "They seem to think highly of you here," she commented. Brian's a mate, a frustrated biker. Well, the waitress spoke very highly of you. What waitress? The restaurant's closed. The girl who wiped down the tables. Tall, mid-30s, dark hair, nice figure, pretty face. Jeff looked around the empty room. Point her out. I can't. She's gone. But she had good things to say about you. Jeff paled. The restaurant closed half an hour ago. Helen, all the staff have gone home. Brian is alone here. I can't help that. I know what happened. She was here, and she was dressed as a waitress. I have to say, with her looks, she could do a lot better than waiting tables in a chip shop. We spoke, and when I told her I was here with you, she smiled and said you were the nicest man she knew. It really happened. I know I'm not imagining it. No, I'm sure you're not, Jeff replied. It's just that your description sounded like someone I used to know, but it couldn't possibly be her. Jeff shook his head to clear it and nodded toward her plate. Get stuck in and tell me what you think. Home again. Jeff looked across at Helen. She was fast asleep in the seat beside him. She had said she enjoyed her meal, but hadn't been able to finish it. Now he was driving her back to his place for some much-needed rest. Helen obviously couldn't wait. He expected her to wake when he stopped in his driveway and switched off the engine, but she just shifted in the seat and continued to sleep. Gently closing the door of his truck, Jeff walked up to open his front door before returning for Helen. He lifted her from the seat and carried her upstairs to the guest bedroom. Laying her on the bed, he untied the rope around her waist and removed his jeans from her legs, easing the sweatshirt off. His gaze fell upon her resting form. She was quite something, around 5 feet 4 inches, with a slim and shapely figure. Her skin was pale, with freckles on her shoulders. If you had asked him to describe his ideal woman, it wouldn't have been the one on the bed. Someone more like his ex-wife, Jackie. So why did he feel this warmth in his chest as he looked at this girl, who must be 10 years younger than him? As she lay there, her face looked angelic, even with her uncombed red hair. God, you're beautiful. What fool hurt you so badly? He thought, covering her with the duvet. He retrieved a toweling bathrobe from the wardrobe and hung it on the door. Sweet dreams, fair princess, he whispered as he left the room. Jeff left Helen sleeping and went back out to lock up his truck, then settled down with a glass of wine. He wondered what could have happened to put her in such a state. One thing he was certain of, it wasn't money. Even the brief glance at her clothes had told him they were not cheap. He recognized a style reminiscent of what Jackie used to wear. For a moment, he was back in Richmond, sitting on his bed, watching Jackie dress to go out. Jeff shook the thoughts from his head. He hadn't thought about Jackie in months, and now a new woman was in his house, stirring memories. But that's all they were, memories. There was no longing, no regret. She had hurt him in the worst way, but that was history. The cheating no longer consumed his thoughts, and he was glad to be able to recall the more pleasant times. Helen's image came back to him, and again he felt that warmth in his chest. Whatever her troubles, they could wait until morning. He put his jeans, sweatshirt, and her skirt in the washing machine, set it to wash and dry, and switched it on. By morning, they would be clean and dry. Then he headed to bed, reflecting on the events of the day before picking up his book. Just after midnight, his bedroom door opened. Oh, I'm sorry. I was just checking it wasn't a dream. Helen had put on the robe he'd left in her room. Couldn't you sleep? Jeff asked. I just woke up somewhere unfamiliar and panicked, she replied. Did you undress me? Yes, but I didn't touch your undergarments. Your skirt is in the wash. Oh, I see. Thank you, Helen said, blushing slightly. I don't suppose you have something I could sleep in. I don't have anything clean. Sorry, I haven't worn pajamas since I was a kid, but I've got some long shirts with tails in the wardrobe, and there are t-shirts in the second drawer down. Helen grabbed a shirt from the wardrobe and went to the bathroom. Jeff heard the shower running as he settled down to sleep. Sometime later, he felt the bed move as she climbed in beside him. "Jeff, would you hold me, please? I really need someone to hold me," she whispered, her voice shaky. She started to sob almost immediately. Jeff took her in his arms and held her close as she cried. When her sobbing stopped, Jeff turned over, and she nestled into him. "Thank God tomorrow's Sunday," Jeff thought as they drifted off to sleep. When Jeff woke up, Helen was gone. He had a shower and made his way down to the kitchen, half expecting to find himself alone, as usual. Instead, he found Helen searching through the cupboards. She had already made coffee and toast. "I was going to start breakfast, but I didn't know what you liked. I was just trying to find something to iron my skirt. Do you have an iron and ironing board?" Jeff retrieved the iron and board from the cupboard under the stairs and brought them to her. "Thank you," Helen said, looking down at the skirt. "It's so full of creases, I couldn't possibly wear it." Jeff glanced at her. His shirt never looked that good on him. Her bare legs were long and shapely, and she had her hair wrapped up in a towel. In the daylight, he could see that her eyes were green, and her youthful face was dotted with freckles. "Egg and bacon okay for you?" he asked. She nodded, and he started the cooking as they sat in silence. Helen repeatedly looked into Jeff's eyes. She saw kindness there, but also sadness. When he topped up the coffee, he gently encouraged her to open up. "So, do you want to tell me about what led up to last night? I don't want to burden you with my problems. You've done more than enough already. I should go. You can leave now if that's what you want. It might be a bit difficult in only your skirt and underwear. I'll drive you wherever you want to go." As she put the last piece of toast into her mouth, Jeff glanced at her left hand. He noticed the gold wedding band topped off with another holding a large sparkling diamond. "I see you're married. Do you want to call your husband and tell him where you are?" At the mention of her husband, she started crying again. Jeff immediately understood what the issue was. He got up and stood beside her, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. "So it's husband troubles. What's he done?" "I don't have a husband anymore. He's divorcing me." Jeff sat down again and took her hands in his, waiting for her to calm down. "So that's what brought you to the beach last night?" "Partly, I suppose." "I don't know, Jeff. This is so unlike me. I'm normally the one other people depend on. Can you believe that? I run a team of accountants, devising custom-made plans to help people pay less tax. Now here I am, unable to cope with a marriage breakup. There's nothing silly about that. Psychologists rate it as stressful as the death of a loved one. You didn't see any warning signs?" "None. Douglas and I had been married for 10 years. I thought we were doing okay. We've been trying to start a family, but without success. 3 weeks ago, he told me he was in love with someone else and moved out. But that was 3 weeks ago. What's happened since then? I saw him with her on Friday. They were going into mother care. She's pregnant. She's giving him the baby I couldn't. I don't know what got into me. I don't suppose a man can understand how it feels for a woman to know she must be infertile. He left me for someone who could give him the children he wanted. So you felt worthless and unloved?" "I suppose so. I don't know how I felt. Really. Suddenly, my reason for being was gone. I wasn't a whole woman. It didn't matter if I lived or died. I don't know why, but I got on a train and ended up here. Do you still feel that way?" "I don't know. I don't think so." She squeezed Jeff's hands. "If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't be here this morning. Thank you. I'm still alive, and I owe it to both of us to make the best of that. In that case, we've a busy day ahead. You need some clothes, and then you need to speak to Angie. Jeff, I lost my purse last night. I've checked my coat pockets. It's not there. It must have come out in the sea. Everything was in that purse. My driver's license, credit cards, and all my cash. I don't have any money. Does a motorcycle mechanic make enough money to loan me some cash?" "What makes you think I'm a mechanic?" "The dealer's name is on the side of your truck. That's because I own the dealership. Don't worry about the money." "Who is Angie?" "The short blonde girl at the party last night. She's one of the best solicitors in the West. She'll help you with the divorce. You may not want it, but you can't stop it. Angie can make sure you don't lose out. Is there anything you haven't thought of?" "Yes. How I'm ever going to wear that shirt again without seeing you in it. Now, go up, dry your hair, pick out a clean shirt, and we'll go into Newquay to get you some clothes and shoes. Your old ones will be floating past the Isles of Scilly by now." Helen almost smiled as she went up to dry her hair and get dressed. Jeff knew that Newquay wasn't the best place for clothes shopping, especially on a Sunday. Desperate problems required desperate remedies. Helen used the journey to observe more closely the man she'd spent the night with. His dark beard made guessing his age difficult, but the traces of gray in his hair helped. She guessed he was about 45. His strong arms were tanned, as was his face, which told her he spent plenty of time outside. She remembered the comfort of being held by those arms, how safe she had felt. She couldn't quite understand what had led her to climb into his bed, but she was grateful for how respectful he had been, offering comfort without expectation. By 2 p.m., they had managed to get her enough clothes and shoes to last a few days. They sat outside a cafe, drinking coffee and making plans. Jeff called Angie to arrange a visit on their way home. After a light lunch, Jeff took her on a tour of the area before heading to Angie's house. Throughout their time together, Helen couldn't help but study him. Jeff was an attractive man, not just in appearance, but in the way he carried himself with quiet confidence. In the shops, he had expected service and received it effortlessly. The assistant seemed pleased to serve him. Why would a man with so much going for him be alone and carrying such sadness in his eyes? She wondered. They arrived at Angie's, and Jeff left the women to talk about the divorce, while he and John, Angie's husband, took a couple of beers into the garden and talked about bikes. After the better part of an hour, the women joined them, and a tearful Helen asked to go home. The journey back was quiet, and Jeff wondered whether he had pushed her too hard. He decided to delve a little. "How did it go with Angie?" "She told me the same as you did. I can't stop it, so I've got to get the best settlement I can. She mentioned that with another partner, I might want to try IVF, and that a good settlement might pay for that. She helped me come to terms with things. Douglas, my husband, didn't leave me just because she could give him children. He only found that out after he started cheating on me. She helped me see, for the first time, that it really wasn't my fault." Then Helen asked, "Jeff, who is Wellard?" "Angie said if I wanted to know you, I should ask you about Wellard." "Wellard is me. It's a nickname." "So how did you get such a strange nickname?" "It was at the Street Paul's Carnival in Bristol. It's quite a spectacle and a magnet for the Rasta community. People travel down from London for it. Trouble is, that year the National Front held a rally in Bristol on the same day, and there was a bit of trouble. And you were involved in the trouble." "Not involved. Really. There's something about me you should know. I don't go looking for trouble. Most of the time, I walk away from it. But there are some things I just can't ignore." "Go on. Tell me about Wellard." "Okay. We were at a burger bar down by the station when a young kid came along. He couldn't have been more than 17. He was just minding his own business, going to catch a train, when he was set upon by half a dozen National Front skinheads. At first, they just pushed him around. But then one of the group kicked him in the groin. He went down, and they all started kicking him. I don't think any of the other bikers saw it. There were 2 cops at the station, but they just stood and watched. I couldn't stand by and see an innocent lad take a beating, so I started the bike and rode straight at them. The group scattered, but when I got off the bike to help the lad up, they came back. The one who started the kicking pulled a knife and said, 'This ain't your fight, Granddad, so just walk away.' I told the kid to get between me and the bike. I could hear the rest of the bikers running over, so I knew we wouldn't be outnumbered for long. The bloke with the knife lunged at me, so I swung at him. I had my crash helmet in my hand, and it hit him full in the face. I broke his nose, jaw, and cheekbone, apparently. He was certainly out cold. The lad just squeezed my hand and ran off into the station. And the police did nothing all this time. Oh yeah, when it was all over and the guy was laid out on the road, they came over and tried to arrest me. That's when Angie came to the rescue. She gave them her business card, took their numbers, and told them that her client would happily answer questions at home. She also said they could expect an official complaint about their failure to protect the public. It turned out the guy I hit had just gotten out of prison 2 days earlier. He'd done a rather nasty number on his girlfriend. He was out on license, so he went from the hospital straight back to jail. But why Wellard? Jeff smiled. That's because of what the lad said as he gripped my hand. Awesome, man. You was well-ard for an old guy, innit? Jeff laughed. The next time I went out on a ride, as I pulled off my helmet, the whole bike crowd was chanting, Well-ard, well-ard. The name just stuck. So, you're not just my hero. You're everyone's knight in shining armor. I'm not even a knight in black leathers. I just try to do the right thing. Well, I'm very glad you do. Whatever led me to your beach did me a huge favor. She leaned over to put her head on his shoulder. Can I cook for you tonight? Of course, if that's what you want. As she squeezed his arm, she became excited when she felt his well-defined muscles. That night, as she cooked, she kept glancing at Jeff, and every time, the excitement returned. She couldn't remember the last time she'd felt so drawn to a man. She knew she wanted him, but she wasn't sure what the next step should be. How could she get him to make a move? She thought about the previous night when she had been completely vulnerable, and yet he'd done nothing. Perhaps he doesn't fancy me, she thought. She started on dessert and made her decision. It was time to take her life back, and if that meant making herself vulnerable again, then that was a chance she was willing to take. For the first time in 2 years, Jeff ate a meal at home that he hadn't cooked himself. He sat at the table while Helen waited on him. He couldn't keep his eyes off her as she moved around the kitchen and served him. He tried not to let her see him watching her, but the thought of her lying next to him last night excited him. He admired her trim waist and remembered the sight of her lying on the bed. Jeff asked himself why anyone would walk away from such a charming and beautiful young woman. After they finished eating, she made him coffee. As she placed the cup on the table, she turned and kissed his lips. Jeff responded immediately, wrapping his arm around her waist and pulling her onto his lap. They shared a few tender kisses before Helen pulled away, catching her breath. Well, that answers one question. You're straight, she teased. Of course. Who said I wasn't? Jeff replied, puzzled. No one. It's just, I keep hearing what a lovely man you are, but there's no woman in your life. I was curious, she admitted. Are you happy now that you know? I'm not sure. You had me at your mercy last night, yet you didn't try anything. I suppose you just don't find me attractive, Helen said, searching his eyes, hoping he'd deny it. She longed for him to hold her close, feeling a deep desire to be cared for, especially by him. If I had taken advantage of you last night, I'd have lost your respect, and rightly so. I turned away from you to make sure you didn't feel how much I was affected. As for not finding you attractive, I think I've just shown the opposite. Her heartbeat quickened as she listened, feeling the strong pull toward him. She wondered if she should wait for him to make the first move or take the lead herself. Her mind was made up. It was now or never. I'm glad you said that. It makes this next part easier. You've been so good to me, and I hate to ask for more, but I'm going to. Would you spend the night with me? She asked, her voice soft, as she looked down, her long red hair falling over her face. Jeff was stunned. This beautiful young woman was asking him to stay close to her. It had been nearly 2 years since he had been this intimate with anyone. He paused for a moment, reflecting on her words, and realized she wasn't asking out of obligation. He struggled to respond, his face reddening as he spoke. Helen, I'm really flattered, but being close to someone like that means a lot to me. I wouldn't want it to happen just because you feel grateful or feel you owe me something. It has to be about genuine care, for both of us." Helen was quiet for a moment. "I should feel insulted, but I don't. I'm not offering anything out of gratitude, though I should be thankful for all you've done. I'm asking because you're one of the most wonderful men I've ever met. My head may be a mess right now, but this isn't about feeling grateful. I want you. If you didn't care for me, you would have handed me over to the police or taken me to a hospital by now. So, I'll ask again. Please, Jeff, stay with me." She took his hand and stood up, leading him upstairs to his bedroom. They stood by the bed as Jeff gently lifted her chin and kissed her. Helen smiled into his eyes. "I've never kissed a man with a beard before. I thought it would be prickly, but it's soft and tickles my nose," she giggled. Jeff wrapped his arms around her, holding her close. The warmth of his embrace reassured her, and her breathing became heavier as their connection deepened. They shared the quiet intimacy that followed, feeling closer than ever. Afterward, Helen smiled, still feeling his closeness. "If I can stay here, you might not have to wait long," she said softly. She curled up beside him, pulling herself closer as he wrapped his arm around her. "You can stay as long as you want," Jeff replied, kissing her gently before suggesting a shower. "I think I should take a shower. Is there room for two?" she teased. They showered together, enjoying each other's company before returning to bed, where they snuggled up and drifted into a peaceful sleep. When Helen woke, she gazed at Jeff with affection. Jeff stirred, waking up to her smiling face. "I'm glad you're awake. I didn't want to start the day without you," she said playfully. She leaned in and kissed him, thanking him again for how he treated her. "You think it's one-sided. Last night was the best I've ever had. And you think you should be grateful." Helen smiled, kissing him once more before slipping out of bed. Jeff noticed the time for the first time that morning. He would be late for work, but the thought didn't bother him as much as it should. He wanted to savor his time with her. Over breakfast, they discussed their plans for the day. Jeff had to go to work, and Helen planned to visit the bank to sort out her accounts. Without proper identification, everything that identified her had been in the purse she had lost. Jeff told her it was no problem, but she felt the need for her independence. "I must go home, Jeff. I need to sort things out. I have a job. The company will want to know why I didn't go in today. I've canceled all my cards, but they'll only send replacements to my home address. My passport is at home. Once I've got that, I can prove who I am and get access to my own money." She saw the sadness returning to his eyes as she pressed on with what she had to say. "I'm going to ask another favor. I'd like you to buy me a train ticket to get me back to Radlett. I'll pay you back as soon as I get access to my bank accounts." "The money is not important, Helen. I don't want you to go. I like having you here, and I love being here. To tell you the truth, I think I'm falling in love with you, but I must take control of my life. There is so much that needs to be done. I need to get control of my finances again. Then there are all my possessions in the house, not to mention my clothes. Douglas has already moved out, so I'm going to sell the house. You must see that, Jeff. I've got a whole new life ahead of me, a life that I hope will include you. Before I can do that, I have to wind up my old life. This is not the end, Jeff. More like the beginning, if you want it to be. You must know what I want. If getting you back means I lose you for a while, I suppose that's what I must do." That night, they enjoyed each other's company again. Both thought it was even better than the previous night. The following morning, with a heavy heart, Jeff drove her to the station. They arrived just as the London train departed. Faced with an hour's wait for the next train, Jeff and Helen found the station cafe and settled in for the wait. "Helen, when I asked you why you helped me, you said you owed someone. I don't think it was money. So do you think you could tell me what you owe, and to whom?" The short answer is that her name is Vanessa Richardson, and I owe her my life. Nothing special, just something I can't pay back. You can't expect me to leave it at that. We've got plenty of time. So tell me the story. Are you sure you want to hear this? It's a long story, and you may not like what you hear. Just tell me, Jeff. Okay, the story starts 2 years ago. I had my own software company. You've probably heard of it, Cockburn Software Solutions, or CSS PLC. I set it up straight out of college, and it sort of took off. Everyone was buying PCs, and Windows made them easier to use. We wrote commercial software, office suites, and accounting packages. We rode the wave for a while, and did very well. When we floated the company on the stock market, I did very nicely. My wife, Jackie, and I held on to 60% of the shares between us, and I effectively gained a partner with expertise in business. Things went well for a while, but my projections showed the demand for our software packages declining. Even Microsoft started looking to develop hardware as another revenue stream. I knew we couldn't carry on forever, so I started looking for alternative income sources. Our expertise was in software development. So I looked into developing bespoke software for business users. I also set up a department to develop digital TV boxes. My partner, Simon, opposed all of this, seeing it as a drain on resources. But with 60% of the shares, my wife Jackie, and I always carried the day. That's when the problem started. I traveled around the country drumming up trade to enable us to continue to expand. I was away from home for about 2 days a week, but I brought in several contracts for bespoke software. I should have seen what was happening, but I didn't. I was completely focused on keeping the company moving forward. I could have sold up then and there. I have come out a very wealthy man, but people depended on me, and I wanted something to pass on to my son. The upshot was that I didn't realize I wasn't giving my family the attention they deserved. Then my most successful deal happened. I landed a contract to develop the firmware for digital TV set-top boxes. It was the start of our future. I was high as a kite as I drove home. I couldn't wait to tell everyone about the deal. All the way home, I was making plans. I saw that I had neglected Jackie, and I was going to start making up for that. I thought we'd start with a holiday, just the 3 of us, anywhere in the world. I'd let them choose. I knew whatever they wanted. I could afford it. When I got home, I was a little surprised to find Simon's car in the drive. What the heck? I thought. I can share the good news with him as well. There was something odd about the way they all sat there on the sofa. Simon, Jackie, and my 17-year-old son, Helen, all sitting side by side, waiting for me. I expected Jackie to get up and welcome me home, but she just sat there. I dropped my bag, clapped my hands, and with a big grin, told them the news. I'd done it. I've pulled it off. We're going to be part of the biggest revolution since the invention of TV. Probably 20 million set-top boxes for digital TV. And guess who has got the contract to develop the firmware? No one moved. No one spoke. Don't you understand? This is worth millions. And that's without the upgrades that are bound to be required at a later date. Sit down, Jeff, Simon said. It was the first thing anyone had said. I sat down in the chair and looked at them. What's going on? You should be overjoyed. This deal secures the company's future. It's not going to happen, Jeff. We've shut down the development section and laid off the staff. The company can't afford it. So, we're going to stick to what we know. What do you mean you've shut it down? On whose authority? It may have escaped your notice, but I'm the majority shareholder. Jackie and I have a controlling interest. I'm the CEO, damn it. I noticed a small movement as Jackie's hand slipped from under her legs and rested on top of Simon's. There was that little squeeze. The kind of thing couples do when they support each other. That's what I'm here to talk to you about. We had an emergency shareholders meeting yesterday and voted you off the board. The company can't afford all your flights of fancy. We are a good, profitable company, and we'd be a darn sight more profitable if we didn't have to finance all your pet projects. And this has nothing to do with you being involved with my wife. It was just a guess. But that hand movement told me there was more than business going on. No, it doesn't. That's a completely separate issue. This is strictly business. Of course, I'm grateful to Jackie for her support. I'm sorry, Jeff. Jackie spoke for the first time. He's right. Your spending was out of control. We owed it to everyone to stop you before you ruined the company. Oh, really, Jackie? And whose side were you on when he told you that? Was it my side? Or did you go to his place? She looked at the floor and passed across an envelope. I opened it to find a solicitor's letter telling me that my dear wife had filed a petition for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. I won't take you to the cleaners, Jeff. You've been a good husband, but it isn't working anymore. I hope we can still be friends. Friends? You steal my company, you get involved with the enemy, and you expect to remain friends. Did you ever know me at all? I hope when you've calmed down you'll change your mind. We still have our son to think of. We should try to get on. I'll be leaving with Ian tonight. Perhaps you'll think it over when we're gone. I found it hard to believe what was happening. Half an hour before, I was on top of the world. Now that world was falling apart. I was still reeling from the shock when I realized my 17-year-old son was sitting there and had not said a word. I knew he was there for a reason. So what else was to come? So, Ian, what's your part in all this? I asked. I can't believe you're sitting there and have nothing to say. I'm going to live with Mom and Simon. So he's taken my company, my wife, and now my son. Is that it? Well, what do you expect, Dad? Everyone knows you were loaded, but what advantage did I ever see? You made me go to the local comprehensive when you could easily afford school fees. It was the local comprehensive that made me what I am. Nobody owes you a living, son. That school didn't do too bad a job. You managed to win a scholarship for the public school 6th form. No, I didn't, Dad. She paid the fees because you wouldn't. He knows it's the easy route into the top universities. So you're prepared to sell me out for 2 years' school fees and a new Mini. I put my hand to my forehead. God, where did I go wrong with you? Simon and Jackie got up. Jeff, I know this is a lot to take in. I think we should leave you alone for a while. He offered me his right hand, which was his mistake. Perhaps he'd forgotten I was left-handed. Strictly business, Jeff. Nothing personal. I gripped his right hand in mine, then smashed my left into his face, knocking him to the floor. Blood was running from his nose. You've stolen my company and my family. Of course, it's personal now. Get up and get out of my house. I looked at Jackie. Are you planning on marrying him? Yes, as soon as the divorce is final. Well, just remember, Jackie, when a man marries his mistress, it creates a vacancy. What is that supposed to mean? I'm sure you'll figure it out. Maybe Ian here will help you. Jackie helped Simon to his feet and held on to him as they walked out the door. Ian followed without a word. As I closed the door behind them, the only thing I could feel was emptiness. Since leaving university, there were only 2 things in my life, my wife and my company. Later, of course, came my son, and he also formed a prominent part of my life. In less than an hour, it had all been taken away. On TV, people in my position reach for a bottle. I've never understood that. I drink when I'm having a good time. I certainly wasn't doing that. I sat in the chair, trying to decide what to do, but no answers came. I got up and walked around the house. I used to love that house. What's not to love about it? A large Regency house overlooking Richmond Park. Of course, I loved it, and so I thought, did Jackie. Now it was just an empty shell. All the happiness I'd known there was gone. I don't know how long I paced around the house, trying to find something to be happy about. It got dark, then light again, but it meant nothing. I could hear the telephone ringing somewhere in the distance. I tried to think of the last time I was happy without Jackie. I remembered the holidays with Mom and Dad in the caravan down in Cornwall. Both Mom and Dad were gone, but the feeling of happiness I associated with that caravan kept pulling at me. I knew I had to go there. I just walked out of the house, and there I was on the beach. The same beach I played on so joyfully as a child. I didn't know why I was there. Of course, it didn't make me happy. Instead, it made me miss Mom and Dad all over again, reminding me of how alone I was. The tide was going out, and I walked toward the ocean. The waves crashed against me as I strode into the surf. It seemed right to end my empty life in a place filled with happy memories. I walked out further, and suddenly she was there, standing in the sea in front of me. She stood about 5 feet 10 inches, her long dark hair cascading down her back, wearing a white one-piece swimsuit. She looked at me and spoke. "This is not the way, Jeff. Turn around and let's go back." "Why? What's the point? There's no reason to go back. There is always a reason to live. There are things you have to do, people you have to meet." "What are you talking about? And how do you know my name?" "I'm talking about you. It's not your time. If you go further, I will have to save you. Turn around and come with me." She offered me her hand. "Come with me, Jeff." "Who are you? Do I know you?" "My name is Vanessa, and no, you don't know me, but I know all about you. Please come with me." I took her hand and turned around to follow her. She walked elegantly out of the waves. I tried to guess her age and put her at about 35. She led me up the beach and into the dunes beyond, where we came across a house nestled in the dunes. It was of unusual construction, completely made of wood, with a veranda that looked out to sea, almost like an old colonial bungalow in sunny Cornwall. She led me up to the door and took me inside. She let go of my hand and left me in the hallway. A few minutes later, she appeared with a towel, drying her hair. "The bathroom is through there. Why don't you go and have a shower?" I moved off in the direction she indicated and found the bathroom. I was still in a daze, moving very slowly. In what seemed no time at all, she was there beside me, helping me out of my clothes. She turned on the shower and waited for me. I stood under the spraying water, not moving at all. When she stepped into the shower with me, I should have been surprised. Looking back, I should also have been excited. She was incredibly beautiful, but I felt nothing. I was numb. She pulled my head down to her shoulder as she washed my hair and hugged me while she washed my back. "You're in shock, but don't worry. I can help you. You look like you haven't slept in days," she said. She led me to the bedroom. "We'll deal with that first." Still naked, she took me to a bedroom and put me to bed. I woke gently. It was dark outside, and Vanessa's arm was wrapped around me. That's when I realized it had all been a terrible dream. I moved away and started to turn over. "Oh, Jackie, I just had the most awful dream. I dreamed you'd left me, and you and Ian had gone to live with Simon." I turned toward her and ran my hand up her body, her neck, and then her face. Something was wrong. I reached for the bedside lamp, but it wasn't there. I started to panic. "What's going on, Jackie? Where are we?" The light came on. I looked into her eyes, and everything came flooding back. Oh God, it wasn't a dream, was it? Vanessa took my chin in her hand and kissed me. "No, Jeff, it wasn't a dream. It all happened. But it doesn't have to be as bad as you think. Look at me, Jeff. Don't you like what you see? Yes, you're very beautiful, and any man would feel privileged to wake up with you. But you are not the woman I'm in love with, are you? Are you still in love with her?" "I don't know anymore. She obviously doesn't love me." "Don't be too hard on her or yourself, Jeff. You must know why he attracted her. The question is, do you want her back?" "I don't think I do. She chose Simon over me. I'd always be thinking I was second best as far as she was concerned." She kissed me. "Never ever think of yourself as second best, Jeff. Now, are you going to use this opportunity? Or do I have to wait another day?" "What do you mean, another day? It's 2 a.m. You've been sleeping for 30 hours straight. I'm a normal woman with normal needs. It's been a long time for me. And when I'm sharing a bed with a handsome man, I do get a bit excited." Vanessa put her arms around me and pulled me closer. She leaned in, and her lips brushed against mine. I pulled away. I'm sorry, Vanessa. Can we take this a little slower? I'm not sure I can handle all this yet. She smiled at me and kissed my forehead. So that's not a no then. It's a not now. That's all right. I felt the need to go to the bathroom right then. When I returned to bed, Vanessa was either asleep or pretending to be. I got back into bed and spooned into her. I slept fitfully and woke around 7 a.m. to the smell of coffee brewing. I sat up in bed, and the door was open. Down the passage, I could see Vanessa occasionally passing by. She wore a short silk robe tied around her waist. She returned to the bedroom with 2 cups of coffee. Jeff hesitated, unsure how much he should tell her. He had no idea what effect it might have on their relationship if he shared the details of his past with Vanessa. His mind wandered as memories of their time together resurfaced. She placed his coffee on the nightstand, and as she turned, her robe fell open. She held his head and kissed him softly. "Well, that was a pleasant surprise," she whispered. "Your wife was a very lucky woman. She thinks she still is. She has a new partner now. I know all about it, Jeff, and I'm telling you, it's her loss." "How can you? I barely know you." She climbed off and lay down beside him. "That's what you do for someone you hardly know. I can only imagine what it's like for someone you really care for. Take my word for it. It's her loss. Now, how about breakfast and then down to the beach for a swim?" Helen nudged his arm, bringing Jeff back to the present. "I said you were with her, weren't you? It's okay. I don't mind. It was before you met me." "Yes, I was with her for nearly 6 weeks. We'd go to the beach, swim, and work on our tans. We'd spend our nights together, sometimes even during the day. In the evenings, we'd sit and talk. I told her how empty I felt. I built up a company and made a lot of money, but to what end? I had no family to pass it on to, and even the company that bore my name seemed lost. But great success felt like failure. Vanessa would have none of it. She listed my achievements and all the people who benefited from my efforts. Having such a beautiful woman want me did wonders for my self-esteem. I started developing feelings for her, but she was adamant that our relationship could never be permanent. As the days shortened, she began to tell me she would soon have to leave. The night before we parted, we talked. She told me I needed to reclaim my life. "There are many things you still have to do. You are not a man who gives up. You had given up when you came here, but you weren't in your right mind. Now you can go back, pick up your life, and take it in a new direction." That night, we shared an intimate moment. She stroked my face, kissed my lips, and told me how much she would miss me. The following day, after breakfast, she donned a 2-piece black suit while I wore the clothes I'd arrived in. She drove me to the station in her white Audi Quattro, an impressive car, even at 15 years old, still in showroom condition, with that new car smell. She dropped me off at the station, and we said our goodbyes. "How will I know when you're back?" I asked. "Look for me on the beach. If I come back, that's where I'll be." Helen looked deeply into Jeff's eyes, understanding dawning on her. "The person you owe is Vanessa, and you owe her your life. I suppose indirectly, I owe her mine as well. Yes, you could look at it that way. If it wasn't for her, I wouldn't have been on that beach. If I hadn't been there, I wouldn't have recognized the look in your eyes. You couldn't let me do it because you owed it to Vanessa. That's not completely true. I could never have let you do it. I know things are never that bad. I had to make you see that." "So what happened when you went back? Why did you never find Vanessa?" This is where the story starts to get strange. I realized something was amiss on the train journey home. I bought a newspaper to catch up on the world, surprised to find that some stories from the day my world fell apart were still in the news. According to the newspaper, only 10 days had passed since my life changed. Knowing it couldn't be true, I scored the train for the newspaper seller. How dare he sell me a paper that must have been 5 weeks old? I confronted him about it. He looked at me as if I were mad and told me it was the current issue. He pointed at the date. "See, That's today's date, he said. I insisted it couldn't be, that the date was 5 weeks ago. Tell you what, mate, why don't you look at the date on your ticket? I checked my ticket, and it showed the same date as the newspaper. I returned to my seat, embarrassed and confused. When the conductor checked tickets, I asked him for the date. He pointed to the date on my ticket and confirmed it was correct. I tried to accept this and focused on the crossword puzzle. I got home by mid-afternoon and noticed the message light on my answering machine flashing rapidly. The first few messages were nothing at all, just people unsure of what to say to a machine. The first message of significance came from my secretary. She asked me to call her and even left her home number. A couple more empty messages followed, and then a voice I recognized. "Jeff, are you there? Please pick up. I need to talk to you." My wife sounded worried. After a few more empty messages, there was one from my solicitor. "Jeff, Jackie has been to see me. I think we need to talk. Call me as soon as you get this." A few messages later, it was my secretary again. "Mr. Cockburn, please call me. I need to know you are all right. You've got my number. Anytime, day or night, just call me." I had forgotten all about Janet. I'd never met a more dedicated secretary, and now I had left her in a state of confusion. I made a mental note to call her after I spoke with the solicitor. A few more empty messages, and then she was back again. "Jeff, just pick up this phone and talk to me. I didn't mean it to be like this. Please talk to me." Then there was the bank, desperately needing to talk to me. A few more blank messages, and there she was again. "Jeff, where are you? I still love you. I need to know you're safe. I dropped by the house today. You weren't there, and the bed hasn't been slept in. Please, when you get this, call me." She still loved me, she said, just not enough to stay committed to our marriage. That was one call I wouldn't be answering. I called my solicitor, Stuart Mackenzie, who had represented my company from the beginning. He was a man I trusted both in business and as a friend. I wasn't surprised that Jackie would have gone to him for advice, but my guess was that Stuart sent her away. He sounded relieved when I got through to him. "Jeff, it's good to hear your voice. How are you?" "I'm fine, Stuart. I've been away for a few days to get my head straight, but I'm fine." "What's the problem?" "Jackie came in a few days ago with a chap called Hamilton. They said that you were no longer CEO and wanted access to all company files. I told them that until I had something from you to that effect, or a set of approved minutes from the shareholders' meeting, I needed your approval to show them anything. Is all this true, Jeff? Have you really been voted off? And are you and Jackie really getting a divorce?" "I'm sorry to say it's all true." "Well, I've been a naughty boy. When I couldn't get hold of you, after what they told me, I processed an order freezing all your bank accounts. I need you to drop by my office and sign the paperwork. That Hamilton bloke claims you gave him a first refusal on your company shares at the same price he bought in at. I told him that didn't sound like you, and that he would need it in writing. Are you intending to sell? Do you know Stuart? I rather think I am. But if he wants them, he'll have to pay top dollar for them. I'll drop by tomorrow, and we'll talk then." I said my goodbyes and hung up. Next, I called Janet. The switchboard operator put me straight through, and relief was evident in her voice. "Oh, Mr. Cockburn, thank God you are all right. I've been so worried about you." "I'm fine, Janet. Really I am. I didn't know what to do, sir. I found out what they had done to you, and I wanted to leave straight away. But I have a family, and we need my salary. Don't worry, Janet. You did the right thing. If I needed a secretary, you'd be the first person I'd call. Mr. Hamilton has taken over your office now, sir. I'm supposed to work for him. They made me box up all your personal items, and I didn't know what to do with them. Just put them in the rubbish, Janet. There's nothing that I want from that office." "Are you sure, sir? What about the family photos? Don't you want them?" "Put it all in the rubbish, Janet. That's where it belongs." "The rumors were true then, sir. If they concern Mr. Hamilton and my wife, then yes, they were true. I'm so sorry, sir. I don't know how they could do that to you. I don't think I can stay here. I'll have to find another job. Don't do anything hasty, Janet. If you need a reference, I'll tell them you were the best secretary I ever had. Oh, sir, I'm going to miss you so much. I could hear her crying at the other end of the phone. Janet, would you like to have lunch with me tomorrow? I can pick you up. We'll have lunch, and then I can hand over my car to you. I'd love to have lunch with you, sir, but you don't have to worry about the car. They told me you were keeping that. I don't want it, Janet, but I really want to say a proper goodbye to you. So I'll meet you tomorrow at 1 p.m. Right you are, sir. I'll look forward to it. Janet had been a good secretary for me, and her loyalty was always total. No matter how many times I told her to, she never used my first name. I was always Mr. Cockburn, or sir. I rang around a few of my contacts and got 3 possible openings for her. Then I rang the bank and said I would be in the following afternoon to sort out any problems. For the first night since everything blew up, I slept in my own bed. To my surprise, I slept well. The following morning, I went to see Stuart Mackenzie. I signed the papers for the freezing order so that he was in the clear and got him to lift it. He recommended a divorce lawyer who would protect my assets. He was under no illusions that he would keep the business with Simon in charge, so he was working completely for me. We came up with a plan, and he agreed to handle everything for me. Lunch with Janet was a bit of an emotional affair. I gave her details of the jobs I'd found and told her to call to arrange interviews. When we got back to the office, I presented her with a huge bouquet, and tears started again. I locked the car and gave her the keys, then set off to the bank. Jackie and I had separate accounts, along with a joint account for household and general expenses. I transferred half of the money in the joint account to my personal account and surrendered my card for the joint account. I walked into the charity furniture shop and arranged for them to come to the house to pick up the furniture. From there, I went to the estate agent to list the house. Then I got a taxi home. The light was flashing on the answering machine when I got home. I guessed who it would be and pressed play. Jeff, are you there? Speak to me. Janet, I know you're back, even if I had to find out from your secretary. Can you guess how it feels having her look down her nose at me while she tells me that my husband is all right? I swear she's got a thing for you. Please, Jeff, just talk to me. Over the next couple of days, I started moving out. There was very little I wanted from the house, just my desk chair and my mom's old dresser. Everything else was stuff that Jackie had bought. I put my things into storage, packed my clothes into suitcases, and waited for the locksmith and the guys from the charity shop. When they came to pick up the furniture, they couldn't believe the quality of what I was giving them. A lot of the stuff we pick up is really only fit for the tip, but this will fetch a good price, the driver told me. Thank you, sir. You should be thanking my wife. She's the reason it's all got to go. Oh, I see. I'm sorry to hear that, sir. Still, it's an ill wind that blows no one any good, eh? I shook his hand and watched him drive off with all the trappings of my old life. I called a taxi to take me to a hotel and stopped off at the estate agent's to drop off the new keys to the house. I bought myself a mobile phone, and the following day boarded a train to my new life. I had no idea what that life would be, but I knew I would live it in Cornwall, somewhere near a certain beach. Yes, I intended to search for Vanessa. In case my old colleagues tried to get in touch, I paid for a short period of call diversion from the landline in the house. I didn't expect to get many calls. Shortly after boarding the train, the ringing phone took me by surprise. I answered the call and heard a familiar voice. Jeff. Jeff, are you there? Jackie sounded almost frantic. Jeff, if you're there, please talk to me. I called at our house today to see you, but my keys don't fit, and the house looks empty. I'm hoping you transferred the number to wherever you're living now. Where are you? Jeff, I need to talk to you. I think I've made the biggest mistake of my life. There, I've said it now. Please talk to me. I thought about it for a moment. Would talking to her bring any benefit? She decided our marriage was over, and she had betrayed me in the boardroom. Now it seemed she had a change of heart. Could she possibly undo the damage she had done? No, of course she couldn't. Without saying a word, I disconnected the call and switched off the phone. Within a few days, I found a furnished flat in Newquay. Stuart Mackenzie called me to say that he found a broker for me in line with my instructions. A small amount of my shares in the company would be sold on the open market. If Hamilton wanted them, he'd have to pay the market price. The trick to selling a large number of shares is to do it a little bit at a time. Put too many on the market and the price drops. Sell too slowly, and the news of an event like the departure of the CEO leaks out, and the price drops anyway. I instructed the broker to offload all of my shares at the best price possible. Stuart did tell me that Simon had been in touch with him again to make an offer for the shares. He told him that he would pass the message on. Within a week of arriving in Newquay, I found the beach where I'd met Vanessa. I spent some time on the beach, but met no one I recognized. I went up into the dunes to find the house, but had no success. I returned every day until the day I came upon a concrete base. I was working out what it was when an old man walking his dog came up to me. "You lost or something, mate?" "Not really, just looking for something." I was sure it was right here. "What is it you're looking for then?" "A large single-story wooden house." "You mean the old Richardson house?" "Well, it looks like you found it. It used to stand right here." "What do you mean used to? What happened to it?" "The council cleared the site about a year ago. The kids used to play in it. One day it caught fire. The fire brigade put it out, but the council decided the ruin was a danger to the public and tore it down." "No, it can't be. I'm talking about a house where a young woman lived. She was about 35, about the same height as you, with long dark hair, strikingly beautiful." "Oh, that's her, all right. She and her husband lived here. They used to spend most of their days out there on the beach." "They did. It did my heart good just to look at her. She used to make my heart race, if you know what I mean." It was a sad day when he went into the water. That would be about 12 years ago now. He was one of those guys who set up a .com company. He got out at the right time, sold the business to someone else, and made $1 million in the process. That's why they moved down here and built the house. A dream home, everyone said. She used to be an Olympic swimmer and loved being in the water. He was the problem. He couldn't stop making money. He played the stock market and lost everything, every penny. He couldn't live with it, could he? One day, while she went shopping, he took himself out to the beach and just walked into the water. According to the rumor, she came home, found what he had done, and swam out to look for him. His body washed up down at Senon, but they never found her. That can't be. I was in that house only a week ago. I was talking to her. Not this house you weren't, son. You must have the wrong beach because this is the only house there's ever been on this one. I found myself with another mystery. The first 6 weeks had turned into 10 days, and now I discovered that the house I had been living in only a week ago was demolished the year before. I had to investigate further, so I went to the local newspaper's offices. I told them I was writing a book about the couple and asked if I could look through their archive. It took less than an hour to get lucky. I found the first story about finding Richardson's body. His wife, Vanessa, was not available for comment. The following week, they carried the story of Vanessa's disappearance. There was a photograph of her. It was my Vanessa, looking exactly as she had when she came out of the sea to stop me. I knew then she wasn't coming back, at least not in any way that would allow us to have a relationship. I persuaded them to let me have a copy of the photograph. I went back to my flat and looked at my bank and credit card statements, searching for something to tell me where I'd been for those 10 days. I found nothing that gave me any idea. In the end, I gave up. Even though I knew she wasn't coming back, I still felt drawn to that beach. She had said that when she came back, that's where I would find her. It was as if she wanted me to be there. I bought a house here, and when I found an ailing motorcycle dealership for sale, I indulged the passion of my youth and bought it. Since then, I've spent much of my free time on the beach. Helen squeezed his arm. Did you ever see her again? No, I never did. Not until the night I met you. I thought I saw her coming out of the surf just as we were about to leave the beach. It was only for a second, and then she was gone. Were you in love with her, Jeff? No, I don't think so. I liked her a lot, and she was very beautiful, but really, I think I felt I owed her something. She had given me so much in that 6 weeks or 10 days, whichever it was. In reality, I would have done anything to give something back to her. Do you have her photo? Jeff got out his wallet and produced the picture he'd gotten from the newspaper office. Helen looked at the picture, and the blood drained from her face. I've seen her, Jeff. I've seen her twice. She was the waitress in the fish and chip shop. I met her again when you took me clothes shopping. She was in the fitting rooms in one of the shops. She told me what a good man you were. Do you think she's looking after us? Well, if she brought you to me, I need to thank her again. Perhaps she didn't bring me to you, but she made sure you were there for me. The public address announced the imminent arrival of Helen's train. They made their way out to the platform and kissed like a pair of teenagers. Helen, are you really coming back? You bet. I have to get everything sorted out. I don't know how long it will take, but as soon as it's done, I'll be back. What about you, Jeff? You're not going to disappear like Vanessa. No, I'll be here. I'll wait as long as it takes. He kissed her again as she got on the train. A tear came to his eye as the doors closed, and the train started to move. He waved until he could see her no more and returned to his car to drive to work. August 2, 2003. Jeff was in his element. He turned off the water from the hose and stood, looking at his pride and joy. He sniffed, taking in the wonderful smell of the motorcycle. The Vincent black shadow gleamed in the sunlight. Jeff took his chamois leather and started drying the paint and chrome work. He noticed a taxi pull up, crouching down. He picked up his tube of polish and started to work on the covers. He heard the cab door close but didn't turn to look. He knew who it would be. He had been told she was here. She'd been asking about him. It was only a matter of time before she sought him out. She stopped on the side of the bike and waited for him to get up. It's been a long time, Jeff. You're looking good. He stood up and wiped his hands with his polishing rag. He looked her up and down. The past years hadn't treated her particularly well. She was about 20 pounds heavier, but even her face looked fuller. You're not looking so bad yourself, Jack. You don't need to flatter me. I know how I look. So what brings you to this part of the world? Was the divorce settlement not good enough? I gave you $250,000 from the house. You kept your company shares. Stuart Mackenzie said you were happy with the lump sum for Ian's child support. No, it's nothing like that. As a matter of fact, you were very fair, all things considered. Look, we can't really discuss things out here. Can we go inside? For the first time since she arrived, he noticed she was carrying a briefcase, which made him a bit curious, so he invited her into the house. Once inside, she looked around. This is nice, Jeff. A good-sized garden, I see, and you've got what, 3 bedrooms? Or is it 4? Only 3 at the moment. But you didn't come all the way down here to look at my house. What is it you want? Jeff set the coffee filter machine going and waited for her to answer. It's you I want. I've come to ask you to come back. Jeff stopped in his tracks. His mouth fell open, and his eyes widened. Jackie put her hand to her mouth and started laughing. No, I didn't mean that. I'm not asking you to come back to me, though God knows I would if I believed it would work. I even beg if it would do any good, but I know you better than that. I burned my bridges with those divorce papers. It wasn't until I was without you that I realized what I really wanted. You know how the song goes. You don't miss your water till your well runs dry. You lost me as soon as I guessed you'd had Simon with you. You acted like lovers on that sofa. That was enough for me. How is Ian? I gather he's firmly hitched his team to Simon's wagon. I tried to stop him, Jeff. Really, I did. But he's an adult now. If he wants to change his name, I can't stop him. He still looks up to Simon. Give him time. He's still young. He's had 7 years. I think that's long enough. What about you? I gather it didn't work out with Simon. Do you remember what you said to me as we went out the door? I do, and it came back to haunt me. When a man marries his mistress, it creates a vacancy. It only took him a year to fill that vacancy. It didn't help that I was still in love with you. You never asked me why I did it. I've asked myself several times, and I still don't know. He was just so persuasive. The silver tongue doesn't cut it once you're spending all your time together. Once I caught him in a compromising situation. There was only one ending. So what's happening now? Have you found someone else? There have been a couple over the last 5 years, but they don't go anywhere. You're a hard act to follow, Jeff. You were always a good husband. There was just that 1 year when you were running around all over the place trying to get work for the company to change direction. I was a fool letting that person convince me that you were playing around. I never did. You were always all I wanted in a husband. I had no need for anyone else. I know that now, but it's too late, isn't it? You got that right. Way too late. So this visit isn't about us. What is it about? We want you to come back. Back to the company. We can offer you your old job back, and you'll have a free hand. You can take the company in whatever direction you want. You keep saying we. Jack, who is we? The board and the bank. It won't surprise you, Jeff, because you predicted it. The company is in trouble. The bank won't lend any more money unless we can put together a credible diversification plan. We've tried, but the clients don't believe we have the expertise to deliver. We need someone with credibility. Jeff, we need you. What does Simon have to say about this? He's okay with it, but it wouldn't make much difference if he wasn't. He's still only got 30% thanks to the divorce settlement. I've got 35%. The rest of the board and the bank support me. I've even brought a contract with me. Jeff got up and poured the coffee, then brought 2 cups back to the table. He sat down and took his cup in both hands, took a sip, and addressed Jackie. What makes you think I want to come back? I'm happy here. I have friends here, and I have no need to come back. Oh, come on, Jeff. You can't tell me that you're happy running a motorbike shop. I can see that it allows you to indulge the passion of your youth, but you can't tell me it stimulates your brain. Jackie became aware that Jeff was no longer looking at her, but over her shoulder. She turned to see a Toyota MPV pull up on the drive. A slim redhead got out, opened the back door, and helped 2 copper-haired children get out of the car. They walked toward the front door. Jeff got up and walked toward the door. Are you expecting visitors? Jackie asked. No, I'm not, he said as he opened the door. The 2 children came running in and grabbed hold of his legs. Daddy, why didn't you come swimming with us today? Said the little boy. Jeff squatted down to talk to him. Because, little man, I was expecting a visitor who came all the way from London. Is she here now, Daddy? Asked the little girl. Yes, darling. She is sitting over there at the table. Jeff stood up, hugged the young woman, and kissed her. Jackie felt a twinge of jealousy seeing them together. We missed you at the pool today, Helen said as she put her arm around his waist. Are you going to introduce us? They all walked back toward the table as Jackie offered her hand. Jeff, this is Helen. Helen, this is my ex-wife, Jackie, and these 2 little ones are Daniel and Vanessa. He bent down to the children. This is the lady Daddy was married to before he met Mommy. Helen shook Jackie's hand and then embraced her fondly. It's nice to meet you. I owe you so much. Jackie looked puzzled. What can you possibly owe me? Isn't it obvious? Him. These 2. My life. Basically, if it wasn't for you, none of this would have happened. Well, Helen, if you're trying to make me feel foolish, you're doing a great job. I didn't see a wedding ring. Well, you know how it is, Jackie. Once bitten, twice shy. Jeff, were you expecting me today? Jackie asked. Soon after you booked your taxi last night, someone called to say you'd be coming here. Like I said, I have friends here. Real friends. People who care about me. Now, why don't you tell me the whole story? So, what is it that you don't already know? I want to know the real reason you came. I told you, I want you to come back. Well, you can't have him back. He's mine now. Helen called out from the laundry room. The company is in trouble, Jeff. What I didn't tell you is that we've been made an offer. The thing is, it's an all-or-nothing deal. I only own 35% of the shares. Simon still has 30%, but the other 35% belongs to 4 other shareholders. They all want to sell. Even Simon is considering it. The bank wants us to sell so that we can settle our overdraft. I really did come to ask you to come back. If you come back, I can swing the others behind me. And the bank would give us more time. Just let it go. Get the best deal you can. I don't want to. That company is my last link with our old life, Jeff. I don't want to let it go. Take the offer, Jack. Let the past go. They won't take on our debts. I'll be left with less than £100,000 once we've settled with the bank. Simon will be left with nothing. He remortgaged his house to buy some of your shares and then lost them to me in the divorce settlement. Please, Jeff, come back and help us rebuild the company. You've done it before. And if we let you do it your way, we wouldn't be in this mess. You can't be happy being a motorcycle dealer. You're capable of so much more. Take the offer, Jack. I'm happy here. I like doing what I do. Yes, I am capable of more than selling motorbikes. That's why I have my fingers in so many other pies. Just go home, take the money, and move on. Helen came back into the room. Jackie, I'm about to start lunch. Would you like to join us? I'm sure Jeff would be happy to drag you back to town later. Jackie looked at Jeff and realized she was wasting her time. No, thank you very much. I must be going. Thank you for your time, Jeff. She got out her phone and called for a taxi. No sooner had Jackie left the house than Helen walked up to Jeff, put her arms around his neck, and kissed him. You are a very naughty man, Jeff Cockburn. She doesn't know, does she? And you're not going to tell her, are you? Right on both counts, Jeff said as a broad grin spread across his face. The last time I found something that amusing was when my ex-husband's baby came out brown. Of course, you getting me pregnant made it all the more enjoyable. Like you said, I'm a very naughty man. As they filed into the lunchroom, some of the employees of Cockburn Software Solutions thought there was something familiar about the man with the beard sitting at the back of the room. However, the main focus of their attention was the slim, elegantly dressed redhead standing beside him. Helen waited for everyone to assemble and closed the door before she spoke. Ladies and gentlemen, you will all be aware that CSS has been experiencing some financial difficulties, and the future has been somewhat uncertain. I'm pleased to tell you that, as of 9 a.m. today, that uncertainty has been removed. This company has been taken over by Wellard Data Services. She paused as murmurs spread across the room. Wellard is a company built over the last 6 years to address the need for online data storage foreseen by our founder. We own 2 large server farms, one in Reading and one in Edinburgh. Much of our business comes from companies' desires to disaster-proof their data. We have acquired CSS to add value to our operations by providing online bespoke programs. This is not going to yield profits immediately, so we need to release assets tied up in this company. To this end, we are selling this building and relocating to Truro. No way, shouted a voice from the crowd in front of her. Excuse me, sir, Helen responded firmly. You are Ian Hamilton, project manager, correct? Let me be clear, we are moving the company to Truro. I'll take it to the board if I have to, Ian retorted. Jeff stood up. What code do you write, Mr. Hamilton? Ian looked stunned. I don't write code. I'm a project manager. Well, Mr. Hamilton, all our project managers also write code. So I'm afraid the invitation to move to Truro will not be extended to you. As for taking it to the board, you just have. I am the board, Mr. Hamilton. I own Wellard, and now I own CSS again. What I say goes, and I say we move to Truro." The room was silent, shocked by the revelation of Jeff's identity. "If anyone else feels the same way as my son," Jeff continued, "you are welcome to join him. We hope to take most of you with us, but that will be your decision. We will offer a generous relocation package. As Ms. Mallister has already mentioned, this building will be sold, as will the 2 flats owned by the company. These are currently occupied by young Mr. Hamilton and a young lady who assists Mr. Simon Hamilton. We will be bringing in our own management team. You've already met Ms. Mallister, who is the chief accountant. Those of you who've been with the company for 7 years or more may recognize some familiar faces who will be joining us. There are a number of people who served CSS well in the past, and I've managed to persuade many of them to return. Mr. Simon Hamilton and Mrs. Cockburn will no longer have roles in the company. I will be meeting with all department heads this afternoon to outline the way forward. If you have any more questions, Ms. Mallister will be pleased to answer them. Thank you." Jeff left the room and made his way to what had once been his office, where he found Simon Hamilton packing up his personal belongings. "Good morning, Simon," Jeff said with a slight smile. "Packing up your personal things?" "Well, I wasn't," Simon replied, looking tense. "But I suppose if you want this office, I'll move. I like the beard, Jeff. If you hadn't spoken, I'd never have known it was you." "Yes, I would like you to vacate the office," Jeff confirmed. "In fact, I'd like you to vacate the premises." There was a knock at the door, and Janet, Jeff's old secretary, entered, holding a cardboard box for Simon's belongings. "I really thought you'd want to keep me on with my contract," Simon said bitterly. "It'll cost you too much to get rid of me. You know that. I'll enforce it." "Oh, you really should have read the sale contract," Jeff replied. "The previous owners were responsible for honoring all senior management contracts, which means you'll be suing yourself if you try to enforce it. What's the problem? You must have got £85,000 out of the sale." "Yeah, and I owe more than 4 times that much on my house," Simon muttered. "I had to remortgage it to buy some of your shares." "I wouldn't worry," Jeff said with feigned sympathy. "I'm sure you'll find another job in a month or 2. Perhaps my son will share his redundancy pay with you. After all, you shared your name with him." "You haven't fired him, have you?" Simon asked, sounding incredulous. "I can't believe you'd be that vindictive." "I didn't have to," Jeff said calmly. "He fired himself. He said there was no way he was going to Truro." Simon collected his personal items, packing them into the box while Jeff watched. Once finished, he picked up the box and headed toward the door. "See, you do realize this is all strictly business, nothing personal," Jeff remarked, extending his right hand as a gesture of farewell. Simon hesitated, recalling their last handshake, then turned and walked out without taking Jeff's hand. Jeff sat down at his old desk, stretched out his arms, and ran his hands over the leather surface. A moment later, Janet knocked and entered. "I just wanted to say, sir, it's so good to see you back where you belong," she said warmly. "Thank you, Janet," Jeff replied. "It's good to have you back, too. I bet your last employer was sad to see you go." "They did offer a generous increase, sir," Janet admitted, "but I knew who I wanted to work for. I'll be very glad to have you with us down in Truro. Are you sure it's okay with your husband?" "Oh yes, sir. We always planned to retire to Cornwall. Now that we're empty nesters, there's nothing to keep us here. And he's already been offered a job." "Janet, don't you think you've known me long enough to call me Jeff?" "Oh, I couldn't do that, Mr. Cockburn," Janet insisted. "It wouldn't be right. Is there anything I can get you, sir?" "Not right now, Janet. Why don't you take an early lunch, and I'll see you back here at 2 p.m. "Yes, sir. Thank you," Janet replied, leaving the office. But before long she returned. "There is Ms. Mallister to see you, sir." "Send her in, and then go to lunch. Yes, sir, Janet said. Helen walked in, smiling. Jackie was right about one thing. That woman's sweet on you. She's a hell of a good secretary, Jeff said. That's what matters to me. I suppose this makes you my boss now, doesn't it? Helen teased. You know, I got a fantasy about my boss where I make a mistake, and he has to correct me. So how does he handle that? Oh, I'd have to leave that to him, Mom, Jeff said, smiling back. Helen smirked. I'm sorry, sir. I'll try to do better. But I have to be corrected, don't I? Indeed, you do, Jeff said, moving closer. Whatever you say, sir. You're the boss now, Ms. Mollister. I hope you've learned something from your mistake. Oh, I have, sir, she sighed. I've learned that I'd better make a lot more of them. And what do you think your partner would say about that? Jeff asked, playfully. I don't have a partner, sir. My previous partner was too damaged by his ex-wife to ever try again. The man's a fool, Jeff told her. Why don't you marry me? But what about my children, sir? I'll adopt them, he said, pulling her toward him. In that case, sir, the answer is yes, Helen whispered with a grin. They both laughed at their playful exchange. Suddenly, they were interrupted by the sound of the door opening. Standing in the doorway was a tall, elegant woman with long hair pulled back in a ponytail. She wore a black two-piece suit and smiled at the couple behind the desk, who both looked back at her. Vanessa, they said in unison. The woman continued to smile, then blew them a kiss before disappearing. The couple exchanged glances. That was her, wasn't it, Jeff? Helen asked, her voice filled with wonder. Jeff nodded. You saw her too. She was real. I didn't dream her. If she wasn't real, we both had the same dream, Helen whispered. I got the impression she was saying goodbye. Perhaps she thinks we don't need her anymore, Jeff said, his voice soft. Now, I'll have to be your guardian angel. Only if you'll let me be yours for the rest of our lives, Helen said, sealing the promise with a smile. Thanks to everyone who took the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share your thoughts on the events in the comments below. Take care.